Sorry.
Oh. So that
Thanks for
might
remembering
be funding them, or getting it, I don't know if it's or getting, is that happening? That would influence what's being said?
Yeah, so maybe we could frame the question as like bias and in research. I mean, we call it like industry bias or politics and money and research. I think it's a great question.
Okay.
But your deeper question was like the industry, like example of how much we can trust research and the underlying forces at play in it. And soy was an example of soy research. Yeah, cool. Yeah, great. It's good one. Other questions?
Somebody else wants to tackle the paradigm of conventional medical research?
Piggybacking off of what she was saying, I would actually love to hear your guys' take on hormone replacement therapy just because it is so popular right now.
Sure.
And kind of get your opinions on that and what you guys think.
Yeah. Cool. Any others? Are we get jamming? Yeah, Monica.
Kind of the same thing, but I'm kind of interested in maybe eventually, if possible, getting off of levothyroxine, just because that's what I take right now.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And like wondering if that's possible to
if
do.
it's even possible, and like,
Consider that. Sure. Okay. Anybody else?
Maybe how holistic medicine can work with mainstream medicine and how you support mainstream medicine.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I think that's pretty embedded in what we're going to talk about. So we'll
Okay.
probably get to that during our talk. Yeah, awesome. It's a great one.
A lot of questions about nutrition and what kind of nutrition supports different things as opposed to like certain foods will take away from minerals or take away from, there's timing and there's different foods like almonds, for example, the oxalates and what oxalates will do. I used to eat way too many almonds.
Mm-hmm.
And the oxalates, I'm still dealing with trying to get rid of those, so.
So maybe talk about oxalates a bit. Is that like
Yeah,
to cherry pick one part of the nutrition question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we could dive into that. So, anybody else? So, all right, I'm gonna let you take the floor. So Dr. Celeste, disclaimer, did all the legwork to get us prepped for this. So she's going to be more our guide and we're going to be chiming in. So I'll let you take the floor and lead us in.
So first, don't worry about the PowerPoint that's behind you. It's kind of more like notes for me. So it's just kind of like text behind you. Don't feel like you're missing out on anything. But really what I wanted to address with this open forum today is what is naturopathic medicine? And the reason I felt like that was really important to address is because there's just so many different healthcare practitioners now. There's a huge variety of people providing kind of like adjacent medicine to what we're doing, but the thing is it's not the same. So we're going to dive into like what makes us NMDs.
And feel free to raise your hand as we go through, right? Like this is interactive. So we have fun talking with you. So remember that.
Yeah. So just to lay some like ground goals for today, my goal and for all of us is to kind of understand like what's a naturopathic medical doctor in the state of Idaho and what's not a naturopathic medical doctor in the state of Idaho. What some of these like holistic providers are offering that's different from what we're providing. And then specifically to our profession, what does our training look like? What does our licensing process look like? And what's the philosophy that is the root of our medicine? And then how that actually looks in practice.
Washington state differences too? Does that just make it too convoluted?
I want to focus specifically on Idaho today, just because Idaho has some really weird laws that no other states have.
But when we talk about our training and education, sure, some in the country, which would explain Washington.
Yep. All right, so to get into the weeds of our training, specifically, you'll see naturopathic doctors in Idaho who are licensed naturopathic doctors with the letters NMD behind our names. This is not the same as a naturopath. So the way that the law is written in the state of Idaho is that there's a wide range of practitioners that can call themselves naturopaths. This can include acupuncturists, chiropractors, functional nurse practitioners. However, if someone has actually gone through the schooling and licensure of naturopathic medicine, they will call themselves naturopathic medical doctor with NMD at the back of their name. Specifically to go into some of the licensing requirements in Idaho to get a license to practice medicine as a physician here, you have to graduate from an accredited 4-year naturopathic medical program. So this is going to be a graduate level school that offers a degree in Doctor of Naturopathic Medicine or Doctor of Naturopathy. This is going to be a 4-year program. It's going to include didactic classroom training, supervised clinical training, and then it will be accredited by the naturopathic accrediting body. Right now, there's 6 schools in all of North America that offer this. Yeah, so it's a pretty small profession. So that's where it kind of gets a little confusing when people left and right are saying that they're naturopaths. There's actually not that many of us. We're a pretty small field. On top of graduating from a program like that, we also have to pass a licensing exam that's regulated by our naturopathic board. And we have to provide proof of that passing grade to the state Board of Medicine in Idaho to actually have a license to practice medicine here. And one thing I'll add to that is that we are recognized as fully licensed physicians in Idaho. So we are akin to a conventional medical doctor, such as an allopathic doctor or an osteopathic doctor. What does differ is our scope. So we can't prescribe some of the same drugs that they can, but essentially we are recognized as the same profession. Any questions about that piece? To clarify.
So can you establish as a primary care then?
Mhm.
And insurance covers it?
Or
do you have to assess so like everybody else?
Yeah, insurance is tricky. So a lot of naturopaths, naturopathic doctors can take insurance, but they just make it so tricky that a lot of us don't. Which is, I think, where a lot of people fall into going to like a functional nurse practitioner instead, because they pretty much all take insurance. So.
And there's kind of like a couple of a short answer and a long answer to your question of that. Maybe attempt to like give you the middle answer, which is this answers Kim's question as well, that ultimately the license to practice medicine is a state by state regulatory thing in the United States. So we have national board exams that you have to pass to attain a degree, but to attain a license to practice medicine, you need to be granted that by the state you're going to practice medicine in. In each state, there's a medical practice law, and those medical practice laws have been around in various ways, shape, or form for hundreds of years. For the Medical Practice Act to include naturopathic physicians, it depends on when that state regulated our profession. So in the United States, 27 states regulate naturopathic medicine. So that means in those states, within that, you seeing a naturopathic physician means they have a license to practice medicine. Some of those states have had a license to practice medicine since the early 1900s. Those are going to be the states more likely to have insurance parity and insurance paradigms. The longer we've had license to practice, the more the insurance industry kind of comes alongside. In the state of Idaho, we have only had a license to practice medicine since 2020. So most of the more newly licensed states where there's a medical practice act for us, it's basically there isn't any form of insurance parity. So that's the more technical answer. The more personal answer I have to why we don't are not able to accept insurance is because the philosophy of how we practice medicine is incompatible with how the insurance industry compensates doctors, because the insurance industry compensates doctors by prescriptions and procedures, not by the quality time spent understanding patients' health and empowering them and educating them. So that's kind of a way to put that answer, just to kind of, in my book, answer that more directly. And
I will just add,
Yeah.
in all of those states, Medicare does not cover naturopathic medicine as a blanket. So all the things that Dr. Hunter is alluding to is a private insurance.
Yeah.
But Medicare at a government level does not insure any naturopathic doctors, whether they contract or not. So
Yeah.
it applies a lot to my practice.
Yeah.
So let's say there was a state that their state started doing it in, say, 2005 or 2010, have the insurance, just as a guess on a timeline, do those states that have that a decade worth, have they started to do insurance?
A decade's pretty tight. I would say you're more like in the states that have had licensure and regulation for like 30 years or more.
Gotcha.
There's a much stronger chance. There's a couple states where there's a couple states where like Medicaid mandates coverage, like Vermont. You have to, it's like at the statewide level for all their programs, they're forced any insurance state.
What we found.
But I think that generally, that's just
Another little critter bug.
Yeah.
I messaged her.
So yeah. That was that. And I wish
3-year-old
I could hear my daughter too. That would be better.
more context.
Oh, I call your parents. Oh, I call it your wife. Love you, Allie.
Well, I think that's a really nice segue into the next piece of this. We're going to chat a little bit about the history and timeline of our medicine and kind of how we got here. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Hunter for that piece.
I was a history major in college. In med school, I spent a ton of time in the rare book room learning about where we came from. So it's like, this is my passion area. I'll keep it brief. I promised her under 5 minutes. So, I really want to talk about medical care in America, and what our story is in our country. So if you kind of go back to the kind of founding 1700s, 1800s, all the way into the early 1900s, you had a paradigm and a model of medicine where there wasn't a lot of centralized regulation. And what that meant is that the schooling wasn't regulated and standardized, and also the approaches to health and what defined that philosophically and in practice were very divergent. So in that time period, let's just say the turn of the 20th century, 1900, you had, we call it the conventional physicians. So that's what we know today as like the dominant paradigm of medicine. But you also had homeopathic physicians, you had osteopathic physicians, you had chiropractic physicians, you had eclectic practitioners, which were herbalists. And all of these types of doctors existed, cohabitated in the medical landscape. And there wasn't necessarily a strong preferential tilt toward one or the other. And so naturopathy emigrated into the United States from Europe and the nature cure movement around that time of the turn of the 20th century. It was brought over by this guy named Benedict Lust, German guy. He was cured and healed in these sanatorium retreats up in the mountains of Germany. And this is kind of where the roots of this kind of medicine came from, which was a lot of water therapy, a lot of heat, air, water, light, naturopathic medicine, right? Working with nature. So those are kind of some of the modalities that were part of that practice, but dietetics, fasting, getting rid of morbid matter out of the body was the term they used back then, was the model of healing. Is let's get rid of toxins and then our body will take care of itself, feel better. But how the medical landscape evolved was that in the first few decades of the 20th century, this was also a time after the Industrial Revolution where industry and the oil and railroad tycoons started to run the country, in essence, or many people would argue that from a historical perspective, where they started to wield more and more influence and power over the decisions of, you know, what became, you know, the winners and losers, in essence, in all sorts of aspects of our society. And medicine is no different in that story, in that they commissioned a report called the Flexner Report, was created in, I think, 1910. And this report, which stated that there were standards of education, and the schools that did not meet those standards could not graduate their graduates. And so what ended up as the net outcome of that is that I think 49 out of 50 homeopathic medical schools had to close. 10 out of 10 naturopathic medical schools, all the chiropractic schools, essentially it cherry picked and penalized and made sure to move into non-existence all of these, we would call them holistic medical fields, including our own. And they could no longer graduate graduates. People out practicing could stay, but no one new could come. And this kind of change was influenced by a lot of the tycoons who were kind of cozied up with the newfound pharmaceutical industry that was developing at the time. So all of the patent drugs that were being derived from, you know, petroleum products and various industry byproducts. I mean, this is a real thing, that there were financial interests vested in this metamorphosis as well. And that's not speculative, that is fact. And so that is a part of our history to be mindful of, that the medical paradigm was not always this is our medical system, and then these are all these peripheral, the term that is like to use is complementary and alternative medicine. I mean, I wouldn't define it as alternative up until the Flexner report and what the, you know, fallout of that was. It was just the different medical paradigms. The good thing about the Flexner report, I would argue, is that standardizing training created some more firm bars about the rigor and scope of training, but unfortunately it also picked winners and losers. And all of these holistic health fields, or naturopathic medicine included, was one of the losers. And so through that time, as our society and medical field evolved, and, you know, drug, patent medicine, and surgery became the paradigm of choice, all these other professions survived, but kind of barely. And we moved through a huge era of, you know, modern medicine, modern processed food, you know, science, and the idea of human conquering nature. And, you know, it was the baby boomers were the first generation really raised on processed food, right? And so that's kind of an era of that. And, you know, modern patent medicine and antibiotics came about, like, saved millions of lives, right? I mean, there's obviously drugs have their place, but there was a evolution that I feel like really the way that it hit in the 70s, where there was a counterculture, like, this doesn't feel right, this isn't working for our society. And there was a big wave of people wanting to return into the natural medicine fields in our schools, which were having like 5 or 10 graduates a year. There were 2 schools at the time in the early 70s. All of a sudden, the founder of this clinic was in the largest class ever. There were 90 some people in his class. And so the profession really started to take off. And we started to, like, really, granted, 6 schools at this point compared to what, maybe like 200 conventional medical schools. We're still a tiny profession, but we started to grow and become more prominent and start to pass licensure laws in states that didn't have them. There were, like, in the 1990s, like, I think 6 or 7 states passed regulatory laws, and it's kind of built from there. So our profession has come onto the scene through all of this. And our medical training, as Dr. Celeste said, also in that metamorphosis, you know, built the level of rigor that conventional medical schools have. So the scope and depth of the medical training is just as deep as medical doctor DO schools. But we've also retained the roots of what our medicine is about. And so that kind of brings us to the current scene of where we are in, like, the story of, you know, my version of history of medicine in America. So before I tip over to the philosophy discussion, it's an exciting one, I want to see if there's questions about some of the story I shared, or kind of comments. Cool. All right, so did a good job.
I will say just real quick,
Yeah.
anybody on the Zoom
Yeah.
call, I did put this in
Yeah.
the chat box, but if you don't have your chat box open, you can open that, you can raise your hand, or you can submit a question in the chat box, and I'll make sure it gets transcribed over to the notes here. So anybody on the virtual call, you can use your computers.
Awesome.
All right, on to the philosophy of naturopathic medicine, kind of the meat and potatoes of who we are and what makes us naturopathic medical doctors. Dr. Hunter was kind of referring to the different medical paradigms that were existing at the time that there were different medical schools. And I think one way to kind of define our paradigm is that we view symptoms as intelligent signs from the body. They're not necessarily something that need to be suppressed, but it's kind of a clue to find out that there's some kind of dysfunction and disharmony in the body. And then it's our job to follow that clue and kind of fix where that disharmony is, and not necessarily just fix the symptoms. So one thing that sets us apart and also sets us apart from other medical paradigms and unites us as naturopathic medical doctors is the principles of naturopathic medicine that we have. I want to go through them just because they're so important to our profession and how informing how we practice. First is to do no harm, which is similar to every other doctor that's practicing. That informs everything we do. The second is the healing power of nature. So having that ability to really trust that nature does provide all the things that we need to heal, and kind of just letting nature take its course as far as allowing the body to heal itself and using natural substances if we need to. The third is to identify and treat the cause. So kind of what I was referring to before, as far as finding the disharmony in the body and using the symptoms as clues to really go in and see where that disharmony is taking place. Number 4 is doctor as teacher. That is my favorite principle probably because I get only so much time with my patients, granted more than a lot of doctors, but really if I can teach my patients to change their lives in ways that can help them form new habits and actually create health from a foundation, then I have done more than any supplement or any herb or natural medicine can do. The 5th principle is to treat the whole person. So that's the idea that there's not just a physical body in isolation, but there's this whole mental, spiritual, and emotional component, and it's literally impossible to separate them. If there's a false belief in the spiritual realm, it's going to create physical dysfunction, and our job is to kind of figure out where is that false belief and make that connection because we just can't separate them if we're trying to treat the whole person. And number 6 is prevention, something that natural medicine does really well. There's doctors that are really good at fixing symptoms when they happen, but as far as actually preventing symptoms from happening in the first place by building really good habits to build health from a foundational level, that's a lot of what our medicine does. We also have this idea of the therapeutic order. So essentially, it's using kind of the least high force interventions and the most gentle changes in health first before we actually start throwing things in like natural medicines or even pharmaceutical medicines, drug surgeries at the very top. At the very foundation of that is going to be lifestyle change, good nutrition, social determinants of health, and then that mental, spiritual, emotional component. And I think one thing that's important to point out is when I was saying that the principles of naturopathic medicine unite us, it also is, it serves as our standard of care, which can almost be a fault sometimes because naturopathic doctors practice very, very differently, but it also allows us the freedom to really practice our medicine as an art and a science versus just a science where we're following a recommended algorithm. I don't know if you guys wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think, I like the therapeutic order, and anybody who's in the room, if you want, there's a little triangle back there, so it kind of helps give a visual to it that Dr. Celeste added. You try to find the root cause, and there's a lot of these, components to this that sometimes sound a little idealistic, right? It's like, yes, we want to find the root cause. And most of my patients are over 70. I'm like, cool, we're going to find the root. Then what are you going to do with it? Right? Like, let's back up time. So I think the other cool thing is Dr. Celeste was alluding to is the art of medicine. We find the root cause or we get a good trail, right? We're on the hunt. We have the symptoms. We're sniffing it out. We still have the ability then to utilize our tools to palliate, to help you through, what you have going on. So not necessarily in a suppressive way to just shut it down, but to say, can we do a top down, bottom up healing journey? Can we be creative with this pyramid and these tools that we have? And I mean, the freedom in that is exactly what you're leading to, is like, we're not algorithmic. You're not going to be like every other 72-year-old woman who walks through the door with knee pain, right? It's who are you? And I think that's just really exciting to say it's not a step ladder. It's we jump back and forth on the rungs to do what's needed for your health picture.
My contribution to this, it's always struck me that it feels like the mainstream paradigm, the goal is to obliterate symptoms, and that's a job well done. And through whatever means necessary. And so if the symptom is high blood pressure, if the symptom is high blood sugar, if the symptom is pain, we need to remove pain. And like the kind of conversation stops there, or it feels like that's been my experience over the years. And the really beautiful thing about our philosophy is like this illuminating wisdom and belief and like core of what guides us is our bodies are intelligent. They're intelligent. They are inherently wise. They're trying to communicate with us about, this is the hard part. What are they trying to communicate? What is the deeper learning that is trying to be conveyed? And I think that's why we have a job, because it's really hard to figure that out, to really understand the intelligence and the complexity of that communication amongst the myriad of possible things contributing to that symptomatic communication. But we really believe in our bones that like we want to understand that intelligent communication, and we see those symptoms as intelligent. And that we also believe that when we put the conditions for health in place, that the body heals itself. And so when you look at the therapeutic order in the top-down pyramid, at the bottom is established foundations for health. I tell people 90% of my job is working on those foundations, and it's challenging people to examine those in their own life and have perspective on what's serving their vital force, their health, their well-being, and what's getting in the way of it. And I'll also, take another step further and acknowledge the blessing of being able to be in the field that I'm in, that generally the people who come through my door are really interested in understanding the intelligence of their body and making commitments to respond to those root forces that are being disturbed through their habits often. And that most of my colleagues in our mainstream conventional medical field have very few patients walk through their door with that interest in the core of why they're seeking help. And so I think that again, massive gratitude for this privilege in this life to get to help people in that way who want to examine health and what it really is through that lens. And then the cool thing, and that's the other thing I say about what we do is, hey, my greatest joy is to work myself out of a job. So doctor is teacher. It's like when we teach people to understand themselves and the intelligence of their body and being and what it's communicating and what it's saying, and respond and transform and change to that, you become your own doctor. You doctor yourself, right? That's the goal of why we're coming together to do this work, is to learn how to doctor ourselves, to be empowered in that. And where we're just slamming down symptoms, to be like, symptom, go away. We're not learning a lot. We're getting the symptom away for a time and maybe creating other symptoms, but we're not getting to go on that journey. And I think that's the offer of what, made me, at least, I want to speak for all the doctors, choose to be in this field, is the privilege to get to do that work of self-discovery with people. And that's what the philosophy.
in short, because he's verbose and I'm not.
Mhm.
If anybody's familiar with a toddler, the more you silence them, the louder you get, right? I mean, that's your body.
It's a good metaphor. Yeah.
Your body's gonna whisper words. If you don't listen,
Mhm.
it's fighting back, and it's super intelligent, and it's more intelligent than the synthetic chemicals we use to suppress it. And so I always think of a toddler, like the more times you tell them to be quiet, the louder they're gonna get. And so.
Touche.
Yeah.
All right, so how does that philosophy actually work into our practice? Like, what does our day-to-day look like as naturopathic doctors? One thing I want to touch on is the fact that a lot of times people will ask, like, oh, what conditions do you treat? The thing is, we don't treat conditions, we treat people. And so we're going to look at that entire aspect of your health, your mind, body, spirit, all of that, and we're going to treat that. And in treating that, it's going to allow the body to actually treat the conditions itself, essentially. To get into the actual, like, what therapeutics we're using, I kind of was using the guide from Henry Lindlar, who's one of the naturopathic medical doctor fathers. And he summed it up really nicely with a couple of the bullets that I have up here, but we're going to start with returning to nature. So that's really going to be looking at your lifestyle, stress management. Are you sleeping? What are you putting in your body 3 times a day? And just kind of like starting with those basics, we can actually gain a lot of ground with that. We're also going to use the elementary, is what he called it, principles of nature. So that's going to be air, water, light, and electricity. A lot of doctors still use that to this day. So I personally, in my practice, love to do a lot of environmental medicine. So that's going to be like teaching my patients about endocrine disruptors and purified air and purified water, getting nature exposure and sun exposure. And then the electricity piece is in there too, because a lot of doctors will use, like TENS units or things like that to actually stimulate some blood flow or various different things in the body. We'll also use medicinal compounds. That's kind of where herbs and homeopathy come into play. And we'll use some supplements maybe to shore up some of the nutritional deficiencies that are oh so common in our modern world. That we can't really fix with food because our soil's depleted. So that does have a spot as well. Not all naturopathic medical doctors use manipulative therapies, but it is part of our medicine. So some kind of chiropractic manipulation, that's where craniosacral comes into play. We might use or refer to PT, but there is like a heavy lineage of physical medicine that's a piece of our practice as well. And then finally, there's the mental spiritual aspect, which I've alluded to a lot, but that's where we're going to try to find the false belief that's causing someone's disease and get to the root of that. And I have a quote here from Henry Lindlar that I think really beautifully sums that up. It's fear is the great emotional enemy of health. Cheerfulness is the best of all tonics, and love is the greatest physician. Yeah. Yeah. So those are kind of like the basics of what our medicine entails. And of course, a lot of doctors will use, like, sometimes we do use pharmaceuticals. Sometimes we need to, palliate some symptoms while we actually work on some deeper healing. That's kind of the beauty of where we're at in history in our medicine, is that we get to be integrative, but really the roots of our medicine are kind of these therapies that I was just going over. Any questions about that, or if you guys want to add anything?
I'm curious about branding.
Yeah, I would definitely say that's part of our therapy. I mean, especially if you look into the history of our medicine. Dr. Hunter was referring to it, that there were these like sanatoriums in the mountains in Germany that kind of has a piece with hydrotherapy and exposure to sunlight and all of that. You could almost argue that there's electricity in that as well, because you're getting the exchange of ions when you're actually grounding. So that's absolutely a piece of our medicine.
I watched a documentary on that. And there was a girl that was a Navajo, I think it was a Navajo girl, but she was very, very sick. And they already kind of knew, the tribe knew what to do. They put her in the earth, not buried her, but, and I guess she got well. So it was interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I I definitely believe in the healing power of nature on every level. Nature has what we need to heal, so I'm not surprised to hear that story.
I have a little thing to add. This might be the cynic in me a little bit. I do believe nature has the power to heal, but I also believe that one of the core tenets of our profession should include advocacy for the planet. Nature is losing its ability to heal in our environment over the course, and I think that's another reason we have jobs. But the intention with which, we're teaching people to do these things is so important because it's not always as simple, right, as going back to nature, because sometimes our environment isn't conducive for healing. So not only do you have to be intentional about just the basic existence in the natural world now, I think you also need to be an advocate for the planet, because I don't think anybody alive now currently has ever lived in a non-toxic environment, societal, financial, socioeconomic, or polluted. And so that piece of it is just a huge passion of mine. And I think it gets sometimes overlooked, is that we want to get back to nature, but our nature is diminishing out from underneath us. So
Yeah, we shouldn't have to add air filters or water
Yeah.
filters,
Yeah.
but unfortunately that's a piece of our medicine now. So. Do you have anything on that? Any other questions, comments?
I think it's just reinforcing that, we've talked about all these differentiations of, what is a licensed naturopathic physician? What does that actually mean of like what rigorous training they've gone through to be a primary care physician that can identify serious disease and work you up for it, and, versus, oh, take these herbs and, but like another thing that makes it even more complicated is naturopathic physicians who have attained our level of training and passed those board exams. Like, to reiterate what Dr. Sloss said, they are practicing radically different in terms of the tools they're drawing upon within this wide potpourri of possibilities. So it kind of really makes it hard to really define us through the modalities we use, the toolbox we use, and really important to remember the philosophical concept of how we think about health, and that being our unifying aspect to what would be seeking out a naturopathic physician or an NMD. Because quite honestly, even the three of us radically differently practice modalities, and we're not necessarily telling you what our favorites are here today, but it's it's just knowing that we share this really common ground about how we think about health and what health means, and educating and teaching patients in that way, but maybe completely different tools to work with that. Yeah.
Right. So what results do we get in our practice with all of this? The short answer is it kind of depends on how much our patients are willing to lean in and do the work, because we're not doing that work for our patients. We're here to facilitate the body's ability to heal itself, and kind of remind the body of the blueprint that it was given. But really our job is to just maybe guide the process, kind of set everything up, and then let the patient, take control of their health and go on that journey, and maybe be there to guide them. But at the end of the day, it really is the patient's journey. So it kind of just depends on each patient's willingness to interact with what the cause of their symptoms are. As far as the outcomes in our care versus conventional care, one thing that I kind of like to point out is Dr. Hunter was saying it earlier. We like to graduate our patients if we can and work ourselves out of a job. So really, at the end of the day, we're trying to just help our patients experience what healing actually is, and let them figure that out in a way themselves, while we're being the teacher in their health journey. And then Dr. Karen was going to talk a little bit about the safety of natural prescriptions and responsible prescribing.
Yeah. I wanted to touch on outcomes too, because I love how Dr. Sless and Dr. Hunter both said that. But to me, right, outcomes in a conventional setting is life or death, right? I mean, they're literally tracked. There's metrics, there's how well did you do this quarter? I mean, doctors are held to a standard that is industry based. It's an assembly line essentially, and they have wins and losses. And so in a patient population that I practice in, that the majority of them are over 70 years old, an outcome to me, right? Nobody gets out of this thing alive, right? Just, for the record. But what's a quality of life? My specialty in Parkinson's disease, you have this diagnosis. How are you going to live well with it? The closest thing to a cure we can get is you live well with whatever you get as you age. So when we talk about outcomes, at least in my practice, I don't speak for anybody else, it's you decide the outcome. If a patient comes to me and you don't have a goal or you don't have a desire or you don't know what you want, then that's your first homework. Like, okay, how are we going to know when we get there, right? You tell me what your outcome is that you're desiring. And I think it's really important to individualize that because we don't follow these standards of wins and losses. And, we shut down all the symptoms, right? We took a pain scale down to 2, but, whatever the case may be. So I think that's a patient-driven conversation. Just my own 2 cents there. I always joke about what's going to be on my epitaph, like what are you going to write on my tombstone? And at this point in my life, it's like a mile high. I have so many things that I want to say. If you haven't been able to tell already, lots of soapbox, but safe prescribing in naturopathic medicine has become a really big passion of mine for 2 reasons. One, Dr. Celeste already alluded to, there's a lot of providers out there calling themselves naturopaths who don't have physician level training and just genuinely don't know how to do it. And I'm not trying to be patronizing. It's just an education piece. Like the amount of time and effort that we put into learning our craft can't be mimicked in a certificate level. And 2, on the other hand, we have a lot of conventional doctors leaning into this realm, also trying to prescribe natural medicines without that level of training. And so the protection that I feel is a big mama bear of like natural medicines are not always safe. They're not always indicated. They're not always appropriate. They can be really, really helpful, but there's just as much and still emerging data and research coming about the natural medicine world to support safety and efficacy of dosing and frequency and how to take. I think somebody asked about like, how do we take our meds and how does that matter? So it got me in a little bit of trouble even at Pilgrims. I mean, the supplements at Pilgrims are really high quality, but the supplement advocates at Pilgrims are not physicians. They don't know if you're on aspirin as a blood thinner and telling you to also get fish oil, right? These are things that we have the expertise in. And again, I don't care who gets mad at me, but
no one can get mad at you.
No one
That's
can get
the
mad at me
point.
here. It's hard to believe.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, and I send people, and so I just, we'll record it. I send people their quality product,
Yeah.
but to have that guidance to know that what you get over the counter isn't always safe or indicated for your condition. And 2, nobody is regulating what they put on the label. One of my favorite examples is, calm magnesium. It's going to calm yourself down. You're going to feel so good. Man, it makes you poop. You're going to feel better if you poop. So maybe you'll be more calm, but they don't have to label it or advertise it based on its clinical indication. Not only that, but the dosing requirements in natural medicine are actually very specific. So when we use suppressive medication, let's say I'm going to put you on a beta blocker for blood pressure. If you take half the dose, you get half the effect, right? We're all in agreement there. If I put you on a natural medicine, if you don't take enough, you're not going to get the effect. So a half a dose of a natural medicine oftentimes won't do anything. You have to get to a certain threshold because it's working with your body's physiology and biochemistry to have that therapeutic benefit. And so when people say, I think I'm just peeing out my supplements, oftentimes I'm like, you are, because you're not taking enough to get any benefit. So we're not getting that clinical effect that we're looking for if we're using natural medicines. Not only that, there's a whole world of interactions. I mean, medicine is derived from plants at its foundation, right? This wasn't just spontaneously existed in a manufacturing facility. So the interactions between herbs and supplements and pharmaceuticals are vast. And again, in my practice of older patients, the polypharmacy piece is astounding to me. How many people I'll just be like, everything's interacting. This is the first step. Stop, change. And so that knowledge base, I would go out on a limb and say only resides in naturopathic medical doctors. Conventional doctors aren't trained in it. Functional and providers are not trained in it. Naturopaths, lay naturopaths are definitely not trained in it. So that pharmacology piece that we have had to take in medical school allows us the ability to understand how these things interact and affect your body's chemistry. So that's a very long epitaph, but you know, the point of it is it's not always safe, it's not always indicated. And when we're prescribing here, we call it natural medicine. We're not using the word vitamins or supplements very often because we're really trying to use something to help shift or change and get a clinical outcome. And that is not only research-based, that there's so much more emerging research on it that I feel like it's just very important because there's so many things, to allude to Kim's question, online. Everybody should take this and everybody should do this and everybody try this. Oh my God, no, like that's not true. Just period, not true. The end. I think that's all the slides I get, right? Are there any questions on that?
Okay, I think you hit it home.
Okay.
And then this last slide here is just kind of a plug for what we're doing here. If you haven't established care here and you're interested, we do offer a free 15-minute consult that you can call our front desk to schedule. Our information is up there if you're curious to take a picture, but you also all know where we are because you're here. And with that, I just want to open it up for questions about kind of anything in the presentation or any questions that came up that might not be related. Just kind of time to discuss. Yeah.
I know you said that one of the founding fathers, sorry, now I'm gonna try to find it.
Might have been Lindlar or Loost.
That's when you said with the quote.
Lindlar.
Yes.
Mhm.
Is there a certain book you recommend or?
That was taken from his book, The Catechism of Nature Cure. So that's kind of probably one of those rare books that
It's also called The
Hunter.
Practice of
Yeah.
Nature Cure. There's two volumes. The first volume's like the best one to read. I don't know if it's in print, but it's probably online somewhere. I have several copies. I can loan one out if you really want it. Cool. Yeah.
Well, your blood panel that you do on your patients also helps you to informs you as to which supplements to.
Yeah, I mean,
recommend, correct?
I think like what we're kind of like we feel really blessed about is that we get to live in both worlds, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we have training and access to every sort of diagnostic workup, you know, you could ever want to run. Like there's no limitation to what any other physician in the country can work up. And part of the problem is more one of Dr. Karen's pet peeve topics, but I'll take a stab at it, is like, you know, like the problem with lay naturopathic, or we call them lay practitioners, they don't have a rigorous 4-year medical training, is when people come in for help, like they come into the supplement store, or they go into their, you know, boutique practice they've marketed the heck out of, and people have really serious things going on with their body that is actual disease, they need a medical professional and a diagnostician. And I think I have such great empathy for my conventional colleagues who are understandably very upset this massive field of natural health is doing great harm, because when people really need serious help for actually pathologies and very serious disease, they're being offered a supplement or they're being offered the latest and greatest natural medicine, and they're not seeking higher level medical care, and their condition could worsen or become more serious or life-threatening. And so us having the toolbox to be able to work someone up with medical tools of modern medicine, it's great you develop those tools, but also to be able to take a clinical history of that patient based on our training and say, okay, my radar is up for something more serious going on. And that's we need that skill and ability to actually be truly physicians. And that's what our training has asked us to develop. And so, yeah, I mean, that toolbox is something we rely on very heavily, and it's really important in aiding our understanding of how seriously things are out of balance in people's bodies. If you want to add anything.
I mean, I'm the metaphor queen. I mean, my favorite metaphor to use as a diagnostician is what's the closest alligator to the canoe, right? You could have a bunch in the river, but the one that's going to eat you first has to be addressed first. And I think that's, Dr. Hunter is saying too, is we have, because of our training, we have that diagnostic capability to say, hey, this is all happening in your system, but we recognize that it could be malabsorption or it could be some thyroid disorder that's inhibiting your body from healing. And that's part of that removing obstacles to cure. But it is, I mean, it's intense training that keep you up at night. Like this is, we have a lot of responsibility. And I think it's just important to understand that difference, which is the main reason we're here, is to say, that does differentiate us a lot from the lay providers. And also it differentiates us from some of the folks leaning into natural medicine. I'll just give an example because I'm okay with it, is how many people come to my practice saying, I had a stool analysis, I'm on $500 worth of supplements, and I don't feel any better, right? And you're like, man, we got to start over. It's that, there is a whole, like a yellow brick road, or there's a pathway to each individual's healing that's not algorithmic. So just because you're using natural medicine, but you're using it algorithmically, does not make it individualized custom care for the person that you are. And I think that's a huge shift that we're seeing. If we're talking politics and we're talking who are the players in the field, I want people to lean into this medicine, but I had an aha moment when you were talking earlier about the history of medicine. And I'll just pose a question because I don't have the answer. I just came up with it. Are they leaning in because the industry is failing? Or are they leaning in because they really want to promote natural health? Ooh, that's a good question, right? I mean, I just came up with that when you were talking, but I'm like, the industry is failing.
Yeah.
People are turning away.
Yeah. Human nature would say the first answer is the vast majority.
Still, I wanted to
Sorry.
pose it, but I love that you voted.
Yeah, and I think that too, to add on to this conversation, like the whole idea of individualization, I think that and when we get into the model of our gold standard paradigm of research, which is the double-blind placebo-controlled trial, right? That's how we test a medicine to say if it's effective. One of the striking features is that you have to, quote unquote, normalize the field of participants so everyone is equal and the same, except for one variable that you're testing. And that's like a logic in a belief system that has just always been like, this is so crazy. We're all so different. Like the air I'm smelling smells different than you. Like the things I'm seeing, it looks different than, like everything, we're extraordinarily unique. So it's really hard when a whole system is founded upon what does the research say? I mean, the research is important, but this concept of exquisitely individualized care is why to seek out naturopathic medicine. It's why your first visit's 90 minutes. It's because we want to know who you are as an individual because your story is fascinatingly unique and the forces driving your story of health are incredibly unique. And that's our job, is to understand the uniqueness of your story and use our gifts of discernment to help collaborate on a path of healing with you. And there just is no formulaic approach. There is no standardized model where everyone gets a stool test and $500 of supplements and gets better. It doesn't work. And that's why we're lucky to be in business, because if we had this individualized model that's not about standardizing, it gets results. And so that's ultimately why we say we have a job. If we don't have an insurance panel where people can just present their insurance card, we have to be good at what we do and help people, or help people help themselves is the better way to put it. And I think that individualized care and that really attending to what is your unique story, I'm really going to take the time to listen and understand it and use my powers of inquiry to come to, here's what I think is going on with you. That is the art and science of medicine blended. Because it is not all a rigorous intellectual thing of learning, by the way. There's a huge amount of intuition that goes into it. There's a huge amount of sensing things that you can't really put your finger on in terms of what guides us as clinicians. I think I can speak for myself. The further I go into practice, the more my intuition plays a stronger role in walking through my process with people, while simultaneously, the more I want to intellectually learn about what the research says and what other people are doing and what's working and what's not. I mean, it's always an and both, right? There's never an end in sight to the growth as a practitioner, just like there's never an end in sight to our healing journey. It's like there's not an outcome. I want outcomes, but there's also not an outcome that you arrive at. It's like, oh, I'm better. The story's over. Keep living. We keep having more stuff to learn.
There's only one question I wanted to take, and then I'm gonna read them to you. How does holistic medicine work with mainstream medicine, and how do we support each other? Awesome question. One of my favorite things, I'm in the neurology field, and I have so many patients that come in and they'll actually whisper, my neurologist doesn't know I'm here. And I'll be like, cool, neither does my husband. Not an affair, this is not an exclusive relationship, you know, it's a really important relationship to establish. And like, I don't have an ego in the game. If I need help from a cardiologist, I'm gonna call a cardiologist. If I need help from a neurologist, I'm gonna call a neurologist. They are the best at what they do in organ systems. They have spent years and years and years studying one organ in your body. So as far as that relationship, they know it best and they can give really great insight. The zoom out picture, I believe we're the best at that. How does that organ play into the rest of this person's health? So when we're establishing a team and we're working with conventional medicine, I mean, I can speak for my practice, but obviously very passionate about this on my epitaph as well, is it has to be a team. I mean, it's just, we are complex individuals and some people do have leading diagnoses and you need that expert to weigh in and to help inform, you know, tip of the spear in some of the research. I have run into very few egos in my almost 6 years. Truly, I will call a cardiologist, I'll call a neurologist, I'll say, hey, here's what I'm thinking. And I have been welcomed in that conversation really nicely. And so I'm encouraged by that. Now there are frustrating times that drive me to have a beer at the end of the day where that doesn't always happen, but it is, I think the human connection point, I do feel that some conventional providers are recognizing there's a lapse. I think they're learning that there's something missing in how they're practicing and there's a lot of curiosity there. And I think when we work together, our patients win. And so we have a great philosophy, they have a great philosophy, but I don't think there's a winner there. I think it's what the patient's willing to do, what the patient needs, and how the team works together. In my opinion, and then I'll let you know the other docs speak, I think it's a necessary tool because I can't discount the amount of education they have on that one part of your body. It's just a narrow view. And so I get really excited to build a team. I love building a team. It's my favorite things to do.
Yeah, I mean, just that word collaboration is so important that if we're to make it, you know, as a species, like we have to take care of each other and lean on each other and work with each other. And if we're closed and closed-minded to leaning on where other people have something to offer for our patients, like then we're not like honoring the spirit of that. And yeah, I mean, the word ego can get in the way of that, you know, big time, unfortunately, but the hope is that, you know, we can move beyond that slowly but surely. And, you know, I think that all of our doctor team at this clinic is really in deep honor of the toolbox of conventional medicine, of physical medicine, of psychological medicine. It's what the patient needs. And that's kind of on the primary care level. Our job is like to be kind of the home point, to be like, what do you need? Whose expertise do you need? And whatever field it falls in, it's like helping people understand, connecting them to the right people. Like, I feel like that's where I've helped people the most, is not in what I've done for them, in finding them who to connect to. And I know that, you know, Dr. Karen's really passionate about that too. Yeah.
The only thing I'll add to that is I feel like there's this idea that sometimes, like, you know, our medicines can't coexist. But obviously, like we were just talking about the collaboration that happens. And I truly believe that every physician, whatever toolbox they use, went into the field with the intention to heal people. So I think just like keeping that in mind, it's like so easy to be like, oh, my allopathic doctor doesn't know I'm here. No, like we all want to work together for the patient. Like I really truly believe that no matter what letters are behind someone's name.
There's a question about nutrition. What kind of nutrition? Talking about the constituents in food and how to navigate that for your own health. Now.
That feels like a big one because our medicine is so individual. So what one person needs isn't going to be the same as what another person needs. And maybe you need one diet, for a short period of time to reach an end goal. And that doesn't have to be your diet for the rest of your life. But there's like so many different ideas around nutrition. And it's just, there's many different tools, even in the realm of nutrition, that we get to utilize. So it's, who are you? Like, what do you need right now? That's kind of my answer to that.
Or to spin that on its head even further, it's like someone could be eating a lot of processed food all day, every day, but eating in this beautiful Zen social digestion is just purring along. And this other person is eating this perfect diet of the most whole food from the most natural organic source, but they're super stressed out and they're running. And the person who's eating the junk is going to have better nutrition from that food, maybe than the person who's eating the really good food. So yeah, it's an impossible question to answer. Sorry.
I said I'm not, but I do want to say my mentor, Dr. Lehman, she had a really great point about this. So I love that you mentioned the word diet. Diet and nutrition, or nutrition includes sunlight, gravity, oxygen, friendship, community, right? So when you're thinking of nutrition, really boil that down to the nutrients, right? And ensuring that those are part of your nutrition plan. I would say nutrition is different than therapeutic diet. A lot of times I'll use a therapeutic diet to achieve a clinical outcome, but nutrition is really individual. But there are some core foundations to recognize that, gravity is a nutrition, it's a nutrient that we need for survival. So just kind of a different way to look at nutrition.
It's mainly like to also reinforce that, people might pigeonhole us as you're going to tell me what the right food to eat is, and that's going to make me better. It's like, oh no, that's like this little tiny little piece of the pie that is much, and for some people it might be a bigger piece of the pie, but for a lot of people it's,
Well, the other part that's part of your cleanse is you encourage the patient to look at what their body is doing after they consume a certain food. So
elimination challenge. Yeah.
Probability of getting off medications. How does this happen? You want to tackle that one?
Well, you'd be good for that one. I don't know.
I mean, I think that's an easy one to come back to from the standpoint of, actually the therapeutic order and the foundation is remove obstacles to cure. If the body is creating the symptom, that therefore a medication is being applied to suppress the symptom, then what we need to go back to is to say, hey, why did the body make that symptom in the first place? 90% of the time, it's because we're living out of step with nature and our habits and our way of taking care of ourselves is at odds. Very rarely is I have this deep, severe genetic disposition, and this is why I have this symptom that needs a drug. Most of the time, it's we're living out of step with being in harmony with how our body's designed to work. So if you want to get off a drug, we need to go examine those foundational forces of health. That's why I shared my little article I wrote after med school that was like my manifesto of what this is about is the 12 determinants of health. And it's like, we need to go back and look at the determinants of health. We need to see where you're living super out of step with your determinants of health. And on a pattern level, we need to work on that and build the foundation for health. And then, I use the metaphor, let's pull that crutch away of that drug. We don't need it anymore once that foundation is really strong and you're on solid footing. So to me, that's how I get under us. I do not say, hey, take these natural substances instead of the drug. The drug is 1,000,000 times more powerful than that natural substance being used in a suppressive way. And honestly, our whole field of natural medicine practitioners, the vast majority of them are using natural substances mechanistically in thought process as a suppressive force to the symptoms they're experiencing. And that's what if someone talked about social media, that's what you're reading about, is using natural substances to suppress a symptom. And that's just, in my humble feedback to that, is you might as well take a drug. It's way more powerful. It's going to work better for that. Want to do the hard work and get to the drivers of why the body created that symptom? Okay, buckle up though. It's going to take some time and a lot of work. That's how you get off drugs. Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I was gonna say is safety first.
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of alluded to that, but
Yeah.
you know, you're on a pharmaceutical, especially if you come from another provider and you're on it, people
Yeah.
will often show me like, I don't know if my blood pressure meds, and then they'll leave 90 minutes later, like, so can I be done? I'm like, oh my God.
No.
Stabilize the system here first. We need to understand more. So oftentimes it is a process, and there are times where it's not possible. You know, I'm just going to allude to I treat Parkinson's. That's my specialty. And I look at the carbidopa levodopa prescription as a supplement. Your brain isn't making dopamine. So this is the most natural thing you can do for your body. Somebody with type 1 diabetes, insulin is the most natural thing you can give your body that can't produce it. If you have hypothyroidism and you can't produce thyroid, that is the most natural thing you can do for your body a lot of times. And then there is a lot of work to do to figure out why it's underproducing or what are the obstacles there. But it's also reframing some of these medicines when they're not suppressive and they actually are aiding a whole process to help a patient understand this isn't as harmful as you might think just because it comes in an orange bottle. It's actually could be the most natural thing you could do for yourself. And like Dr. Hunter was saying, so many times people are exchanging that for 5 or 6 different supplements that aren't even touching the actual root of it, just to say they're natural. So that kind of goes back to natural is not always best or indicated or safe.
Mm-hmm.
So another question that we had, and anybody feel free to raise your hand. I'm just going to look through politics and online information. TikTok, did you say? Are you using?
Well, Twitter, you can get good, you can read Twitter sources, or, you know, you can read any newspaper in the world. But
I'm not mad at it. No, Twitter, TikTok, there's a lot of health influencers out there that aren't terrible. I want to see your dances. Yeah, I'm not gonna field that one. I just want to make fun of Kim for a second.
One thing I actually will say about this is just because there's a source or an article or a study that they link, knowing how to actually read a scientific study is a very difficult skill and has to be developed, hopefully with some training, but that's not very common. So if you actually start to look into some of the studies that are produced, maybe they studied it on 4 people. You can't apply that to thousands of people and say that that's a good study. However, a lot of this internet medicine is like, oh, well, there's a study that was done on it. And to like most people are trained to hear, oh, well, there was a study or studies show equals that must be good research. And that's not always the case. Actually knowing how to read a study is kind of the next step. And that is pretty rare, honestly. And that's kind of where our training comes in. As Dr. Karen was alluding to, we have years of actually learning how to look at studies like that and kind of field which ones are worthwhile and which ones aren't.
And then mostly if you're looking at the stuff on social media, someone's trying to sell something. So they're probably trying to sell you a physical substance or a device. And then getting into Dr. Karen's topic of quality and regulation, there is no regulation in the industry. So whatever they're trying to sell you hasn't been vetted to your knowledge and certainly your training knowledge as a layperson of like, what is quality control in this industry of natural medicine? There's no such thing. So who's the gatekeeper of knowing about quality? Well, people who devote hundreds of hours of training and continuing education, i.e. naturopathic physicians, were kind of like, I feel like honestly, some of the main gatekeepers to that, unless it's people deep in the industry with PhDs, which is about like 1 in a million people, were the actual practitioners that you could talk to about all of this. So bottom line is you may luck out and something may, be of high quality and be actually appropriate for you, but it's kind of like, a moonshot, honestly, to get that, in my opinion, especially to have lasting change to your health. So.
Yeah. And the funding in the study, you kind of alluded to that, even in the conventional studies, who's funding it? You know, you can always look down at the bottom and see, oh, this is funded by Pfizer. It's really fascinating. And you can go on PubMed right now and you can type in a search question to prove the opposite ends to be true. Hey, this is good for you, this is bad for you. And you'll have just as much data and research on both sides. So again, it boils down to individualized care. So you asked specifically about HRT, you asked about soy. The answer is it depends for every single person. Now, these mass studies they've done on HRT are relatively exciting because these are things that the alternative medicine field is known for quite a long time about the safety of HRT and when it's applicable. However, it isn't always applicable, and it's an individual case basis because there's risk factors that need to be addressed and other systems at play. So
yeah, that's definitely the answer to that question. We have to individualize that one big time, especially because HRT are, powerful medications. So just the more powerful the force you're using, the more individualized and cautious you need to be in the answering of that question. So I'll just go out on a limb and say that, like, in my toolbox, bioidentical hormones is one of the highest force tools I use. And so it would take a very judicious and personalized, conversation to discern if that's appropriate for someone.
One thing I'll add to that too, with the HRT conversation is what's frustrating and actually concerning for me, that I'm seeing a lot of is people coming in on HRT because they had a night sweat or something. Night sweats can also be a sign of cancer. And no one's like working things like that up. It's just like, oh, you feel bad, so you might feel better with HRT. Maybe there is a time where that's indicated and it's going to be really helpful, but unfortunately, people just aren't doing the due diligence to be like, what are your symptoms? Maybe it's not menopause, maybe it's not estrogen deficiency, and maybe there's something else going on that we actually need to look into before we just put you on estrogen and testosterone. You're going to feel better on those hormones. So you're kind of just suppressing those symptoms that are intelligent signs from the body, and no one is looking into what those signs are saying. That's just my 2 cents on HRT.
Any other questions?
Is there a political group that's promoting your profession to the public, to government and whatnot?
I'll answer that one. Yeah, I'm that's kind of my arena. So, like, I sit on the board of the IDANP. That's the Idaho chapter of the American Association of Naturopathic Physicians. We are the professional group in our state. We cover our lobbyist who represents us at the level of the state, political apparatus and protects our law. So the IDANP, it's on our website, but I'm on the board of it. And all of these doctors, actually, to be part of our team, they have to be members. It's in their contract, but it's like you could be members too. Yeah, we're fighting for our rights at the state level with that group, and the American Association of Naturopathic Physicians is our professional group nationally. And we're right now actually in the midst of a really touchy situation where they are, there's a new rules based, so not in law, but through rules, that's aiming to cut all of the federal loan programs out from underneath naturopathic medicine, chiropractic medicine, nurse practitioners, all physical therapists, like a huge swath of health professions. The federal government is trying to write through rules, basically only allowing MD and DO graduates to actually accrue low interest federal loans, which in essence, could collapse many health professions. So we're in the midst of that. So we could actually send you an action alert to write your elected representatives and senators and say, hey, legislature, let's do something about this, because that would be a pretty big deal and catastrophic for our profession. But yeah, I will when the call to action comes out. It's pretty soon that they want to really get the comments phase going. But,
We'll put it out on socials and a banner on the website.
Yeah. So we advocate, but we're very little, and like society is shaped by some very powerful forces. And again, we talked about collaboration, but collaboration isn't what drives our society. It's turf wars and power and money. So yeah, we're all here because it's very altruistic. We care. We want to help people, and we're healers. So that's being in the healing arts is like why we do it. And we believe spiritually, if we lead from that, or I do, that everything else is going to work itself out. So, but I think we still have to kind of fight and advocate too. You can't totally walk away from that. So it's a good point.
We are, and I mean, I'll put the invitation out there and even like a little boot in the ass, like get involved. I mean, if this is something that you want to see, we can't do it on our own because we're all busy helping y'all out. Like we need help, we need support, we need the community to say, this isn't what we're going to settle for. And that's, you know, again, the only time health changes is when policy changes. You know, back in the old days of haberdashery, this is an amazing story, right? People were getting mercury poisoning up, down, and over, and everybody knew it. Even the haberdashers, the hat makers knew the risk of the mercury in the hats, but it was their profession, and nothing changed until they made a law that said you couldn't use mercury in hat makers. Even the hat makers themselves and the physicians, everybody knew this was toxic. But until policy changes, health doesn't change, and there's a huge drive for that. So I think we'd be naive to think our tiny profession can just fight on its own without your help and without you sharing our website, sharing the socials, giving testimonies to your healing process, because it is real and it's a ripple effect. We fired up.
And even just within our community too. I mean, this is a little self-promoting. I mean, we want to be here to like be resources to you, and we're so honored you're all in the room with us. But it's like, you know, even within our own profession, like the care you're going to receive here, if you go down the street to another naturopathic office, even with an NMD, it's going to be pretty different. So even just like, you know, telling your community like, wow, I was really liked what I heard there, and these guys are really doing good work and they mean well. Like we want to like, it's the specific lineage of this medicine is not just a universal thing, even within our own little profession. So, you know, like we're really speaking from our hearts or what we're about, and we're all working together because we're unified in the most important ways and how we believe and what we care about. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Make a joke, but that was really nice.
Yeah.
I was gonna say we're smart and good looking. You can't get that every day.
And have big hearts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
No, I do believe in promoting something that's real and good. And one of the things is every time I come, I get Dr. Peterson's card. No offense, but I get Dr. Peterson's card, and then I'm ready when somebody asks me something. And if I think that, hey, I think that they could be a help, I give them a card. You know.
Yeah, thank you.
Because I mean, I'm not done it perfect. I'm working at it, but I tell you, I went to 4 or 5 doctors, and they all told me there's nothing wrong with me. I knew something was wrong with me. I came in, he looked at my labs within 3 seconds. He already saw it. And only now is my regular doctor starting to catch up and say, oh, yeah. You know, so to me, it's like, yeah. So I believe in something. I think we need to stand up for that. And I'm all about, maybe a little too much, but.
No, I mean, he's the bomb. And honestly, like do that.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is that between the 3 of us in our practice, genuinely no ego. I mean, how many times I'm like smashing on doors, like I need help with this. And our staff is going to help anybody you refer anyway, find the appropriate doc based on how we practice. But I mean, Dr. Hunter's legitly awesome. I mean, he's carried the practice here for a long time. So spread the word, but we're all trying to stand on his shoulders and work under his mentorship and guidance, which is huge. But you know, the staff, we also have a really kick-ass staff. So I mean, that's something to keep in mind too, that you don't ever walk into a front office and feel that welcome. So even that piece of it is healing, but
makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
For healing to occur, there needs to be an environmental like experience that someone feels safe enough to like reveal what needs to be healed. And I think that's one of the tragedies about the spaces for healing we've created, you know, is that they don't actually create that safety for people. And so that's been a huge intentionality of the lineage of this clinic. What Dr. Todd started that's been carried forward is like, you come and sit on a couch and, you know, many people are bursting into tears instantly the second they sit down. And it's like, yeah, that's where the healing starts, right? You know, we have the blessing to get to like have a space for that and be a refuge for it, I'd call it, in a world that's really intense, you know, and we can't let our guard down. So that's like letting our guard down is such an important part of where we get to understand what the body's saying. Yeah, and we're blessed to get to hold that space for people and have the time to hold it, you know, because letting our guard down could take some time sometimes. We really have to like, okay, it's gonna be okay, we're gonna get there. And, you know, our system isn't really set up for having that time too. You know, so part of becoming a patient here, if you weren't, like I said, I mean, 90 minutes face to face with the physician, it's like, yeah, it takes time to like learn things, but also just take time to get comfortable talking about your suffering. Like it's not an easy thing that we're trained and raised to do easily, you know, so it's like, yeah, important. Mhm. Did we get all the questions?
Did.
Okay, nice. Thanks everyone for being here. This is a big moment. We have a recording, so you know, it'll be online. Share it with your friends if you want. We'll post it to our website soon. And the